and welcome to Your Vote Counts, a public service program for the Special District's May 16th election that is being produced by Capital Community Media via remote technology and the League of Women Voters of Marion and Polk Counties. All candidates for the Salem-Keizer School Board election were invited, and we will be hearing from 5 of the 6 in our interviews. The candidate was asked to prepare a 2-minute opening statement telling about themselves, their qualifications, and why they chose to run for the office. I'm Bernadine Anderson, your moderator from League of Women Voters, and I would like today introduce candidate Kelley Strawn. And we will now hear the opening remarks.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. I'm very well aware of its long history in the United States participating in the political process, and it's just really an honor to get to be a candidate, to be interviewed by the League of Women Voters. So thank you to everyone. My name is Kelley Strawn, and I'm a candidate for Salem-Keizer School District in Zone 4. I am a native of the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in Central Washington. Before I went to college in Spokane, Washington. I did some graduate studies in a couple of different cities in the U.S. I spent a couple of years working as a teacher in Mexico before I came back home, finished my PhD, and I took a job as a professor at Willamette University in Salem, Oregon in 2005. Thus, I've been in Salem for almost 18 years now. I'm running for school board because, for a couple of reasons. It starts with the fact that my wife and I have raised 2 boys in the Salem-Keizer School District. We have been very involved parents. We are deeply committed to the school district, to the students, to the teachers, to our friends, our students' friends. We just feel very, very strongly about public education, and I very much am interested in working on public education issues. I have been an educator, mostly in higher education, for my entire adult life. Again, I've been in Salem for almost 18 years, working at Willamette University, where I've been a professor of sociology, and for the last 3 years, I have been our associate provost for institutional research. Thus, I have done curriculum building, I've done classroom teaching, and I have done outcomes assessment. In my role at Willamette as a professor, I have worked with a number of Salem-Keizer graduates, so I have a very strong awareness of what we do well here. I have also very strong awareness of some things that we could do differently. So when you take all of those things together, at this stage of my life, our 2 boys, one is in college, one is going to graduate soon. I feel like I'm ready to take on an additional task and work in the public schools, and I would be honored to be elected for Zone 4.
It's very important to get to know the candidates, so we thank you for sharing that information with us. We have questions for our candidate today, and these were developed in collaboration with NAACP, AAUW, and League members. Candidates did not receive the questions ahead of time, and there are 8 questions that were prepared for the candidates, and they may answer as many of those as possible in the time available today. All questions may not get answered. The candidates' responses to each of the questions are not timed, so the candidate can take the amount of time they need per question. Now, let's give candidate Strawn an opportunity to address some of the questions of concern to our community. Candidate Strawn, our first question here is, what are some barriers, either actual or perceived, to parent or custodial families in their involvement and understanding of curriculum? Second part to that one is, what, if any, changes would you make?
Yeah, thank you. My wife and I have seen this with our kids. Barriers to being involved in curriculum, there's a number of them. One is just your familiarity with the school system itself. Do you know who builds the curriculum? Do you know who you can talk to get the curriculum explained to you? Or even in the case that a curriculum might need to be adjusted, what are the avenues by which you can do that? I would also add, and this is part of my worldview as a sociologist, there are so many ways that sort of social structures make it easier for certain groups to access sort of common social processes like a school district, and harder for others. And one of those difficulties is simply the degree to which you are aware of how the system works. Another one is whether or not there are language services that are familiar to you. Do you speak the dominant language? Do you speak the language that the resources are published in? Do you have access to people who can help you translate or interpret as necessary? So, I mean, there are so many ways in which parents have either a deep understanding of how things work in school districts, or they need support to understand that. And so I think one of the ways that as a candidate, I would work on issues like this. I'm bilingual. I lived in Mexico for a couple of years. Probably the second largest language group in our area after English is Spanish speaking. So I would be able to communicate in both languages quite functionally, fluently even. And so I think it takes a commitment, though, on the part of all of us to recognize that it's not as easy and as equal as it seems. I think a tendency that we have is to say, everybody has equal access. Everybody can call the principal. Everybody can call the superintendent. Everybody can speak to the board. But not all avenues are accessible to everybody. And part of that is familiarity. Part of it is language. And there are lots of other factors in there. So I think one of the key things is we all have to agree that those sets of challenges exist, and we all have to agree that we want to overcome them. And I would be very committed to working to overcome that as a representative on the board.
Thank you. Our next question takes us a little bit more into curriculum. Are there curriculum areas you would suggest or advocate for to the superintendent? Examples might be vocational programs, AP courses in African American or other ethnic studies, environmental. What do you think about that?
I would say all of the above to the list that you just gave me. I would start my answer to this by saying I am a deep, deep believer in the concept of public education. I really believe that this is one of the most important innovations of the last 100 years in society, whether that's U.S. society or others. Public education is about all of us agreeing that the overall public is better off if we together make sure that our children are as educated as we can get them. And central to that question is, what is the curriculum for public education? I believe very strongly that public education curriculum needs to focus on science training. It needs to appropriately focus on a broad range of arts and humanities training and history. And I deeply believe in technical training. We need to do more of this. I have spent my life committed to higher education. Over the last 18 years, I have worked in higher education. But I really believe that the public school needs to be preparing everybody for career or for college. And I think we can do that. Salem-Keiser has some excellent programs in place, but we can do a lot more. When I was in school, three of my favorite classes were electricity, woodworking, and metal shop. And even though I went on to college and basically have pursued a professional career, I use all three of those things every day. So I really believe that the curriculum needs to be science-driven. It needs to have a wide range of arts and humanities electives. And we really need to ask ourselves, what are the kinds of career and technical training that students need to have so that they are ready to decide between career and professional choices versus college and professional choices. And then we need to help get every kid to a place where they understand their choices and get to pursue what they want when they're done. So I am deeply committed to this. It's one of the most central components of my campaign, making sure that every single child, student in the Salem-Keiser district, regardless of the demographic group they come from, that every single child is prepared for college or career by the time they graduate.
Thank you. Taking a little bit different direction here, we'd like to know, what are your recommendations to create or improve a safe environment for both students and staff in all of our schools, all levels?
Absolutely. I think we would all agree, regardless of our positions on a number of these particularly narrow issues, the safety of our students and the safety of the employees working in the schools, whether it's teachers, classified staff, administrators, custodial people, everyone is concerned about safety. As a parent of two boys in the district, I have felt the experience of fear of getting a phone call that a school is on lockdown. This has happened multiple times. These are really essential issues. I believe that we need to consistently keep the concept of security in mind that takes into account that security is not just one thing. We tend to debate one particular dimension of this, whether or not we should have SROs in the schools. But security is a complex, multifaceted series of questions. I believe the school board needs to work with the superintendent to ensure that every dimension of this is being addressed. These include the physical safety of our students while they are in class, and that means in relation to one another, that certain students aren't threatening others. It means the physical safety of the teachers and staff, which means safety from both other students, but also people who might come onto campus. It involves the mental and emotional health of both students and staff. And it also involves the physical security of the school building itself. So we need to work together. It is the superintendent's job and the school board's responsibility to supervise the superintendent to make sure that this happens. But the superintendent needs to work in partnership with the community, with parents, with teachers and students, and very importantly, with law enforcement and other security apparatuses to make sure that we have a safe system in place that is safe for everybody, that works for everybody, and that is, in the end, a successful, comprehensive, multifaceted security system. So I would say that's a bit of a roundabout answer, but it comes back to the superintendent really needing to be someone who pays attention to those different dimensions, but who is also working constantly to keep all of the appropriate people involved, keep them informed, and to keep the system working the way it's supposed to.
I understand in your remarks that you're looking for a multi-approach, but I'm going to pull one of the aspects out just for a little more detail. And that is, what is your position on school resource officers, the SROs? And would you budget for their return or not?
The current policy of the Salem-Keizer School District is that we do not have school resource officers. That policy came about after a lengthy period of thought and input and determination, and I believe we need to let it work its way. We need to let it sit for a while because that's the policy we've chosen. I am a social scientist. I have read research on the use of SROs in schools, and while it's a difficult thing for groups to study, most of the evidence suggests that SROs do not achieve what we want them to achieve. And I would also point out that not having SROs does not mean we do not have school security. Per my previous answer, it is the job of the superintendent and the board to ensure that we are deploying all possible resources and methods to guarantee the safety and security of students and teachers and staff. So I believe that the department has, or the district rather, has a policy in place. I believe we need to let that policy run for a few years, and we can reevaluate it if we need to after a couple of years. But I believe for now it is the right one. And again, I believe we need to resist the temptation to focus on just a single dimension, and that focusing on that one dimension, if we don't have that one dimension, this does not mean that we have unsecure or insecure schools. We need to recognize that this can be achieved by focusing on a number of other relevant security dimensions.
Thank you. Now we're going to look at the management side of the school board and ask you to share with the public what is the interaction between the superintendent of public schools and the school board?
Yeah, this is a really important question. We all need to understand exactly how this works. I think sometimes we're tempted to ask the school board to do things that the school board isn't charged with doing. As I understand it, and as it's written in the Salem-Keizer policies, the school board's number one job is to hire and evaluate the superintendent. School board's number two job is to create and review and ratify broad policies that the school deploys. But it is the job of the chief executive officer of the school district, who is the superintendent, to actually develop mechanisms and procedures by which those things play out. And I think this is an excellent balance. There's an excellent example in this in our state governments and our national governments. We have a body that sets policy, but then we have an executive that gets the work done. I think we need to recognize, remind ourselves that school boards are on the policy guidance side, and sometimes we let public issues reach a point where they're demanding that school boards take very, very narrow actions when that's probably beyond their appropriate purview. I don't want to say that that's always the case. Certainly, it is the job of school boards to monitor, to review, to assess the performance of the chief executive officer of the school district. But ultimately, that CEO is the superintendent. We also need to support them in doing their work.
Thank you. I think that since you've addressed that one of your chief jobs, and we just have a minute, so you might consider that in our last question here, could you tell us what are the attributes or the criteria that you would use to make that selection of the superintendent?
Well, we've just selected a new one, so that's a little bit beyond my ability to answer. It's beyond what I'll get to work on in the near future. But I believe that a superintendent that is capable of communicating, compromising, working with a whole bunch of different constituencies is really, really important. That we could look at specific qualifications and specific policies, but that person needs to be able to work together with a lot of differing interests. And so I think a good superintendent is one that can do that.
Thank you. So thank you, candidate Strawn, for our interview today and for sharing your thoughts. We want to thank Capital Community Media for their production. And we are certainly looking forward to hearing your closing remarks. And also, we'd like to ask you to please include your public contact information, so if they want to reach out to you. So we will now have our closing remarks by our candidate.
Great. Again, I want to thank everybody who made this possible. I'm really, really grateful to be here. I am absolutely humbled by the opportunity to be a candidate for a public service job. Running for school board director is a volunteer task, and there are lots of people who are helping me do this, and I'm grateful to them as well. I just want to summarize. I believe that I'm highly qualified to be a school board director. I have been in education my entire adult life, which spans 3 decades. I am 54 years old and have been a university professor for 18 years. I'm now a university administrator. I've also been a parent, still am, of 2 boys that spent their entire educational public school careers in the Salem-Keizer School District. One is now in college and the other will graduate a year from now. So between my experience as a parent, working with friends and parents of other children that we know, working with teachers and administrators, together with my experience in the classroom, together with my experience in curriculum development and assessing outcomes, I believe that I have a tremendous amount of experience, goodwill, and my own education to offer to policymaking in the public school system. So I would be honored and very grateful for people's vote in this process. If you would like to reach out, I'd be happy to follow up. We have a website, and very, very important detail. The name Kelley is spelled E-Y. So anytime you're looking for it, it's K-E-L-L-E-Y. Website is K-E-L-L-E-Y for schoolboard.org, O-R-G. I know that sometimes those things are hard to remember. So if you just look on Google or your favorite search engine for Kelley, again with an EY, Kelley Strawn, S-T-R-A-W-N, and School Board, you will find our website. If you look us on Facebook, Kelley Strawn School Board, you'll find us there, and Instagram as well.
Thank you. We appreciate the efforts that come from people that volunteer to run for our positions. We appreciate the efforts and the technical skills of Capital Community Media for their production. And we thank the community groups that have contributed questions and topics that we could address to our candidates. And we also thank you, the public, for watching this program in order to become an informed voter. Remember to vote by May 16th, because your vote counts.